Okay, here we go. This is the Individual Skills Hockey Podcast, a podcast that aims to bring quality education to youth hockey coaches, parents, and players with the mission of having a positive impact on the crazy youth hockey world. We got a great episode for you today. We have Coach Pat O'Leary in the studio for his full interview. We released one yesterday, or a couple days ago, with a short episode on one hockey topic, but we are going to dive deeper into kind of Coach Pat's past and kind of how he runs his program here at Wayzata. So, Pat, thanks for doing this, and how you doing today?
I'm doing good. Sun's out. It's above zero. Can't complain.
All right. Let's just start off by talking about kind of the time you took over the program here at Wayzata, kind of what your opinion was of how the state of the program, or how that kind of happened, and what you kind of wanted to accomplish those first couple years taking over.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, basically, when I got done playing hockey, I came back to the cities and didn't really know what I wanted to do. So, I got a job. I coached a little bit of Bantams at Armstrong with some guys that I knew and enjoyed it. And then my buddy Aaron Johnson, who's actually the current head coach at Buffalo, got the job at Orono at that time and was looking for someone to help him. And so I was excited to give it a shot. I wanted to see what the high school ranks kind of felt like and different time constraints and dealing with some kids that are a little bit older. So I got on that staff and did that for a couple of years. And then Carl Davis, the coach prior to me at Wayzata, had lost an assistant coach, and so a position opened up, and I got offered that, took that, and then did that for a couple of years, and then went through the whole interview process of getting the job here and finally got it. And so I guess to answer your first question, basically, when I came here, my goal was, prior to coaching, as the head coach or the assistant coach at Wayzata, was just kind of, I moved back to the Plymouth area, and I wanted to kind of get ingrained into the program and get to know kids and, kind of help any way that I could. And then fast forward to when I took over the program, kind of where the state of the program was good. It was, a lot of kids, good kids, and, they were successable. They had been to the state tournament, in 2004 or 5 or whatever it was. And, for me, it was just, I knew Carl was his time to be retired. He'd done it for a long time. And, younger guy coming in, with some energy, that was me. And when I came about, my biggest thing was just, having built those relationships with the younger groups and getting to know the kids and being very visible and, kind of trying to get the community and the family members and to trust the process. And that was kind of my main goal, and just kind of, I was nervous, obviously, but very excited.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because Wayzata has been around since the 50s, obviously, but isn't alike like in Edina, where they have such a storied a history of success throughout the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever the case may be. But that being said, I think that late 2000s, obviously they made their state. They had really good teams in the early 2000s or mid 2000s. Towards the end of that late 2000s is when you started to see some success, and that's kind of when you took over right after that. So what were some things that you wanted to maybe put your stamp on right away as far as changing things, or some things your vision kind of starting out?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the biggest thing, when I first got interviewed after the position, was, some of the things I was going to put in place just for my own regime. And it was basically accountability was number one. And then the second thing, which wasn't really talked about that much, but, kind of, I wanted to, and I don't think it was gone, but I think it needed to be revitalized a little bit, of just, because it was such a different time when kids were deciding where they were going, and, different high schools or going to different areas to play hockey. And I just wanted to get back to the days of, like when I was in high school, when my number one goal was to play for Armstrong. And that was my number one goal. I could tell you, I wanted to make the NHL, or I wanted to play for the University of Minnesota. That really wasn't the case. So my number one goal was to be a Falcon. And that's what I wanted to kind of implement at Wayzata for me personally, was to get that, kids, bleeding the blue and gold and loving to come out of the tunnel at Plymouth and, just really being a prideful in their community and want to represent themselves every single day. And, like if you're a Wayzata hockey player, this is what people say about you when they meet you. So that was kind of the biggest thing for me. And I knew that was a big, job, but, you learn from that and kids learn from that. And that was kind of the biggest thing I wanted to do. And, I think we've done a good job of doing that with the staffs that I've had and the community that we've had. And it's been a fun process and continuing on now.
Yeah, and some of that comes with success that the high school team has. I think more people are interested, let's say this year, than previous years because of all the success that the team is having. So they kind of know who the best players are and they idolize them. But I can speak from my own experience, and this isn't a shot at Carl, but like when I was growing up in the early 2000s, and maybe it was just my family dynamics, I didn't know who the high school players were that much. I didn't have that contact with them throughout the year like we do now. So I think that's really big. So obviously Wayzata is a huge school, and it's growing every single day. They're building new elementary schools and adding on wings to Wayzata U. We joke about all the time up at the high school. So what are some of the challenges, unexpected challenges that people might not realize in coaching such a big program?
Yeah, I mean, I think, some of the things that people don't realize, I guess, is that, is obviously, so basically, you have a number of kids to choose from, which we all know that, right? And you have that at the youth level as well. As they start coming up the pyramid to the highest level of high school, the biggest challenge is, starting at the youth level, is not pigeonholing kids at a certain rank. It happens naturally, which I completely understand. But if a kid makes the Pee Wee B2 team, it's not the end of the world. As long as they're having a great experience that year and getting better, and they're 4 whatever years away from high school anyways, or maybe even more. So that part of it, just keeping them working and having fun, and like we talked about before, it sounds corny, but being prideful and being a Trojan at that age level too, right? And then as you kind of fast forward to the high school level, the challenges that come into place for, the head coach of a big program is just, keeping every kid that makes the program. And to be honest with you, the kids that play junior gold, which we have a lot of them, we have a great junior gold program, with the same values, right? And, it's easy to keep the first line center happy, but how do you keep the last kid on JV, or how do you keep the swing line guys, and how do you micromanage that stuff on a daily basis where you're involving everybody and explaining to them how important they are. And I think another thing that people don't really realize is that in a big program like this, our JV team consists of a lot of sophomores, right? But those sophomores were single A, double A players their whole entire life, and then they come into the high school program and they're not under the lights every single night, and they're not getting articles written about them and so on and so forth. So our staff does a really good job of trying to make sure we show them how important it is to win at the JV level, continue to develop, because those are the kids that are going to fill roles as they get older if they continue to keep working. So the simplest way to answer it is just continuing to keep every kid working hard, having fun, and enjoying each and every year of playing the game.
Yeah, and it's the first time that kids are competing with other kids that are 2 grade levels above them,
and sometimes 3.
So it's shocking. We always talk about, especially at a big program, how sometimes when you get up to this highest level, working hard might not be enough. Mm-hmm. And that conversation is pretty difficult to have with some kids, versus at smaller schools, sometimes being an athlete and working really hard is enough to earn ice time. So I think
to piggyback that, and it's hard, and it's sounds kind of awkward coming from me personally, but it's we've had to cut a lot of good kids. And I'm not just speaking of ability, because by the time you get to our level, all the kids have a talent to play, and we've cut a lot of good humans, but it's almost like I know I'm the end all guy that makes the cut, but sometimes it's the program that cuts them, right? There's just not a spot, or it's, they didn't fill a role, or whatever the case may be.
Or for whatever reason, there's a really, really talented sophomore group behind them. And
or you have 12 seniors like we have this year, right? So it's just it happens. It's year to year every single time, and by no means is there a science behind it. It's just every year is different, and every kid's different. But yeah, those are hard parts.
So over your tenure at Wayzata, I think one of the biggest things is there's built up a level of respect that our program has for our program gets from other coaches and other programs around the state. So talk about how that got developed. Was it just success on the ice, or was there other things that go into it on being a respected program that, most coaches, we talk about it, always, want to play us every single year because they know what they're going to get.
Yeah, I think that, it would be a lot. It would be a lot of work if we were 0-25 every year to, But you can still get respect from people with how you play, how you operate, how your kids handle themselves at the rink, on the road, at home. All those kind of things. But in a microcosm, basically, obviously, winning helps that situation. But winning also is built from down. Like in regards to like the youth level, and continuing to build masses of players that. Because you're going to have kids that are going to leave, you're going to have kids that are going to get hurt, you're going to have kids that maybe don't play hockey anymore, or maybe they don't reach their potential, which happens a lot, and maybe they don't want to be hockey players, which is totally fine. But, I think that I myself, as well as our staff, has always taken pride in, being very cordial with the other coaching staffs, with the other players. I think another thing that happens sometimes is I'm personally, and I know a lot of my staff is very involved in the high performance festivals and stuff at the youth level, whether it's training, we're at Pee Wee games, we're at Bantam games. So I think people, not only our own community, but other people get to know us away from being the Wayzata hockey coach, and get to know us a little bit more as humans and dads and, mentors and stuff like that, which then kind of leads to if we are. And then I guess the next step of it is like, how do your kids act on the ice? How do you play? How do you interact on a daily basis? And everyone has their times when they get a little upset, but I think overall we have a pretty calm and hardworking group, and I think that's why we gain the respect from other communities.
Nice. So I'm going to take you back to when you got the job here at Wayzata, the head coaching job. Was there anybody that you looked to immediately for advice, other coaches or people from your past, and anything memorable to share on what they gave you?
Yeah, my dad was my coach a lot in sports growing up. He learned the game of hockey, I think, over time, but I take a lot from what kind of the interactions that he had with myself and with, like you said, other people, and just and his biggest things were, and it sounds, but it's old school, but just being on time, trying to give the best you can every single time. He coached baseball really a lot, and I think, what I always learned from him when it came to baseball to any other sport is the same thing we talked about, right? So if you're on a traveling baseball team when you're 12 years old, yes, you probably have one good pitcher and a good shortstop, but you need 3 or 4 pitchers, and you need you need to have all 12 guys pulling the same rope, and that's a hard dynamic to do. So he's always been, big for me on that part of it. And I guess, speaking of coaches, I have a lot of respect for Carl, obviously, just because he gave me the opportunity that I had. But one story to tell that was pretty cool, that kind of how I coach now, was when I was my senior year at the University of Minnesota, when we were blessed enough to win the state or the national championship. It was the beginning of the season, and it was myself and Eric Wendell, who lives in Wayzata now as well, and both of us were, I don't know, better word, high level athletes growing up. Obviously, all the guys that play at those high level ones are as well, and are used to being, the scorers and all the guys that are big impact players. So the transition of figuring out how to become a third line center, left wing, for whatever it might be, was hard. And I think the coolest thing was my senior year. It was probably the second practice of the season. Bob Motzko, who's now the head coach at at the Gophers was the assistant coach, and he called me and Eric into the penalty box, and he said, asked me to have a conversation with us, and we were seniors and leaders and so on and so forth. And he just basically told me, he said, you guys are going to be a huge part of this team this year. I mean, obviously we're super talented, but we need you pulling the rope, and we need you going in practice, and we need you going at school, and everywhere you can think of on it. And that was cool for me because I guess I didn't ever have to be told that before, maybe. So for me personally now, and I know we do that as a staff, and I mentioned it before, is you got to make sure that everyone's pulling the same rope. And there's times like this year, for instance, obviously we're good and it's fun and practice is fun every day, but there's been years when we've been 500 or below 500, and those are the years that coaching really matters, and those are the years that really leaned on me a lot, and understanding that, like, some other role players, if you want to call them that, or other guys that have been good players their whole lives, need to step up a little bit more, and we need them. And so that was cool for me to have that, and I know I take that and I use that all the time when I'm coaching right now.
Yeah, and I think that can get missed sometimes by people, whether it's just coaching up your maybe weaker players to get them up to speed, or just coaching the top players because that's how you think that you need to win. But obviously everyone matters, and I think we do a really good job of that at Wayzata, of communicating that first of all, and actually putting our actions there too on how we operate day in and day out. So let's transition to kind of some youth hockey stuff. Obviously a huge program here at Wayzata, both on the girls and boys side. What's your opinion on the state of our program here and how things have been going over the last 5 or 10 years?
Well, I will say one thing, it's been going good, but I will say it's crazy now I coach a U10, so my second stint as a U10 coach, and I think it's been really good for me, and to be honest with you, the program as well, because it's intertwined me into the youth a little bit more, not necessarily in the case of like, what are we doing, what are we working on, all those kind of things, but just I'm at the rink more. I don't know if I need to be at the rink any more than I am, but I am. And but what that does is it allows me to get on the ice with more kids, and then moreover than that, more coaches and I get to meet more families. And I think that when they get to know me like I said before, like as a human and as a dad, it takes some of the stigma away from me being the Wayzata hockey coach. So that's been good. And on top of that, which is pretty cool, the amount of guys and girls that have played at a high level, that have moved into this area over the last, I would say, 10 years, maybe that's too many, but for sure right now, is just astronomical. I mean, the amount of help we have at the youth levels, the names that we have, the ex-players that want to give back, and it's insane.
I joked a couple years ago that, like, in order to be a head coach of a top-level Squirt Pee Wee Bantam team on like a given year, you have to had played in the NHL.
Seriously. I mean, the list goes on, and it's cool because, those guys and girls that we talked about, are good sounding boards for people that are teaching the game and, are driving those things that we spoke about just enjoying every year and getting better every single year. And so I've been blessed at the top with having a lot of great people underneath me, and they're continuing to be, at the youth level that are developing these kids and giving them a great experience. And if they get good experiences, 9 out of 10 years, which let's say, hope it's 10, but 9 out of 10, they're going to be excited and keep working and hopefully kind of get to as far as they possibly can.
So I think there's a perception about Wayzata youth hockey that I've experienced since I've started coaching, which was back in 2016, about how our teams get better as they get older, ultimately ending up at the junior gold or the high school level. But I think it confuses people sometimes when our squirt teams may have struggled in the past and our Pee Wee teams are struggling, but then at the end of the day, it seems like our Bantam AA team is always a top 10 or top 15 team. Why do you think that is happening? Or first of all, do you think that's like a true perception of like what's actually occurring? And if so, then like why?
I mean, short answer is I guess yes, but it's not. I don't know. It's hard because at the youth level, it's very competitive. Whether it should be or it shouldn't be, it is. But I think that how we operate within the confines of what we're trying to do within District 3 and so on and so forth is really good. And I agree with you when I say that, I think what happens as well is there is lulls in gaps of talent in everywhere. I don't care if you have 10,000 people in your association or if you have 50. But sticking to the course on that is very important because, I think it's proven that it's working, obviously, and the more kids you can keep involved in not training, but learning the game properly and getting better, helps them more have success as they get older. And I think that at the end of the day, and to be honest with you, like now that I coach U10, like I'm a competitive guy. Like I want to win too, but even I have to step back sometimes and just be like, let's stick to the process here. The girls are having a great time. Let's keep working on the fundamentals that we're trying to work on. And so it's. I think the setup is phenomenal right now. I think some people don't agree with it. Whether you have a double A team and a single A team, or if you have two A teams and squirts, or the list goes on and on, right? But at the end of the day, we're one of the biggest associations in the nation. We should always have top teams. We should split kids as much as we possibly can. We should be developing the top 45 to 60 kids every single year, and the ones after that as well should have a great experience too. And so it's just, I think the process is going really well right now, and I don't see any changes.
I think the biggest upside to kind of how we've operated is, like you mentioned, the birth years, let's say, because I dealt with a little bit of AAA hockey or coached a little bit of AAA hockey in the past. Sometimes I'd get comments given to me like, you don't have very much talent at this specific birth year. But then what ends up happening from what I've seen is that they show up to high school and all of a sudden they're good players. So kind of sticking with it and not being overly concerned with hanging banners at squirts and peewees has, I think, really helped those kids that maybe weren't ever considered to play for the Blades, weren't ever considered for this or that AAA team, still get really good attention given to them through our system here, and then all of a sudden they show up and they're somewhat of a late bloomer and they end up playing and being successful at the varsity level. So
yeah, and I know, and that's the hardest part. And we said it earlier in the deal is like, using the word pigeonholing kids into a certain spot at a certain age level is hard. Now, granted, there is opportunities for the top squirts to play on these teams that you're speaking of, which is great. But are those kids that are on those teams going back to their community-based model and driving the force with everybody else and bringing everybody else along, or are they just kind of their own, scapegoat and doing their own thing every single time? And to be very honest with you, the kids that are like that do that, good for them if they're NHL talent. Those kids, a lot of them don't play for their high school programs anyway sometimes, or don't, they're always looking for something better. So, it's like the next, take the 3 top kids out of every age level, the next 40 are the ones that are going to make you what you're going to make, at the high school level. And you're going to get some great kids out of that mix too.
Yeah. And then like that's the benefit of it. I think the drawback is, which we always get pushback on, is the stuff we get pushback on is trying to helps the top end kids, whether that be like, we want to play as many games as possible. Playing more games only makes the top end kids better. Mm-hmm. And so that's a decision that we've tried to manage throughout the ranks of like limiting our game count, having as much practice and skill development on Monday nights as possible. Another thing is like tiering, like making a stacked team at like the B1 level. Obviously, winning a whole bunch of games is going to help the best kid on that team. And so I guess that's the drawback of it. But from my position, it's not really a drawback. Because
in one thing I say in this, and I thought about this earlier, just speaking of our high school program, but at the youth level, it's even more important. But and I think we have this. So if you have people that are good enough to challenge the top kids as well, whatever that means exactly. There's a lot of lessons that they got to learn as well. And then also can, keep the other, like we talked about, 45 guys improving and enjoying themselves. That's how it should be. And that's hard. And I know. And so it's like, I think the only thing that I would say, and I think we're doing a good job of it, and I think a lot of people are, is we don't want to not push the top kids too, but that's got to be a yearly process, right? Like, just because you're the top kid of the PWA team doesn't mean you're going to just jump right on the first line of the PWA team the next year, and so on and so forth. So the consistency of the development's got to be done, and most of the things that you're doing to challenge the top kids to the 45th kid are not that small, in differences, but there is some different things that you can do to help them become better overall players on a consistency, which helps them too.
Yeah. All right. So let's move back to high school. Talking about building a winning culture or a strong culture. I think a lot of people talk about that stuff a lot. You hear coach interviews at the college or professional level. Their first order of business is building up a strong culture when they take over a program. What does that mean to you? Like having such a strong or winning culture?
Yeah, I mean it's just put it this way. It's an ongoing deal. You got to be consistent with it. Like we talked about before, is like just the accountability thing, and how they're operating on a day-to-day basis. We all know that kids, boys and girls, at young ages, as they move up and go through different parts of their life, have different challenges. And so it's almost like just the rink should be kind of an outlet for them, and just making it a kind of a safe haven for them. And I think the culture piece of it is, and we're going to say this again, but winning helps, obviously, but at some point you got to build something to help it to win. And so I think what that kind of is we talked about like the skills sessions that we're a part of, including everybody, helping the coaches understand, the type of people that we are. I think that's one of the things I said before was, as I got to know more coaches and more families, like, and they got to know me away from the rink or even on the rink for that matter, that I'm kind of a fundamental based type of guy, that they respect that and they want to be a part of it. And so I think as that transitions through and you come through squirts, peewees, bantams up to high school, you continue to start wanting to be a part of something, and you respect things, and you're very prideful about wearing the jersey, and it's fun, and that leads to more players getting better and more players staying, and then hopefully you can be good at the high school level where it's kind of glorified and people see it, and then we get to do, like this year we get to go to Hockey Day Minnesota, and it's going to be great for our community to see us on TV, and they're going to be prideful that that's their program too.
Talk about the importance of senior leadership in carrying on culture year to year over year, every single year.
I don't think there's anything like that compares to it, to be honest with you. I mean, you could have, I don't think it would work great, but you could have new coaches every 2 years, but if you had good leadership and culture, you could probably keep the winning ways going. But I think when our young guys, and I think it even starts in Bantams, to be honest with you, because some of them are in high school, a lot of them are in high school now, and so they're at the same schools as high school kids, and I think that I've even gotten comments from some of our ex-players of, they always talk about, what did you enjoy the most, or who's your, what are all those kind of questions, and a lot of them always say, well, this kid showed me, what it was like. And now when I say that, people think that's like them coming down on them. It has nothing to do with that. It's like they're encouraging with them, they're engaging with them, and they involve them, and because they know that they need them, and they hope that they can do that for the next level. But that's an ongoing process that keeps going on and on and on, hopefully, and that's how you continue to build a good program. But it's those seniors that have been in the shoes of, whether it's in the JV locker room, whether it's on the fourth line as a sophomore, building them and keep going, and then now they're seniors and they made the team, and it's their job now to show kids how to be and how to act and how to compete every single day. So it's I don't know if I could put a number on, or a money number on what that means. It's invaluable.
Well, like I said before, it's for the sophomores, it's the first exposure on a team, because we are one program, right, JV varsity, of exposure to those senior kids that they've never been around. And sometimes I've talked to parents sometimes, and they are maybe on a Pee Wee team or a Bantam team, and the culture might not be great, or there might be a couple kids that are causing problems. But at that level, first of all, there's only 15 kids, maybe less, maybe 13, and you're sort of stuck with it for an entire winter. Transitioning into high school, there's more kids in the program, and so there's, I guess, more positive peer pressure from the older kids on nipping all that stuff in the butt right away. And I think that's the biggest thing. I was talking to somebody last year, and they were kind of frustrated, and I said, just when you get to high school, like, this stuff is going to solve itself, because our great senior leaders have been through it, and then they just don't let it happen anymore. So
yeah, and I think you can say that about just stuff in general, right? Not even just hockey. Like, it's just as you start getting into different levels of schooling and so on and so forth, and you start maturing a little bit, and it's like, whether it's leadership within the classroom, whether it's leadership as at the high school, or at the elementary school, middle school, all of them put together. The kids that are wavering, off track, can be brought back in. And if they continue to, decide that they don't want to do it, then maybe something else is for them, and they can figure it out. And then the pyramid gets smaller and smaller, and you have, at the end of the day, the guys that are good leaders and kids in the locker room and that are there for the right reasons.
It's hard enough to actually play varsity hockey at Wayzata. Adding like, in a lot of ways, you have to be a contributor to a positive culture to even have a chance. To do it. Yeah,
and I think that I've talked to other coaches in the past and other people, and just kind of like getting that feeling of like no one's more important than anybody else feeling in general is a thing that we're dealing with a lot in the world right now, and in sports as well, and at school and everywhere else. So it's like, and that's the hardest thing, is just getting every kid to respect each other and respect the process, and for us specifically, respect the program.
Great, fantastic. All right, so last section here, and then we can kind of wrap up. I wanted to talk about skill development. Obviously, you are owner of Individual Skills, the sponsor of the podcast. So just talk a little bit about how that got started. We had Rick Beckfeld on a previous episode, but just talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, so basically all that happened is when I was a senior in high school, maybe post that year, I started working with Rick and Duke Johnson at New Hope, doing some skill stuff, which we have a lot of kids that do that with us now, and transitioned to years after, and I don't know the exact year, but when I knew that I wanted to do that for a job, I kind of had some other ideas on what's the next level of this training program going to look like, and so I started implementing that, and it went well, and I met a lot more people, kind of got my name out there, and then I ended up taking control of it, and it's been fun because I've been able to. I'll tell you what the craziest part about it is. So obviously I'm the head coach at Wayzata, and I do a bunch of stuff at Wayzata and all those things, which is really fun. But Individual Skills has allowed me to meet a lot of other kids and a lot of other families from different areas, and watch them grow and help them grow. And it's fun because now I get to watch them play at different levels, support them, and stuff like that. And I built a lot of really cool relationships through Individual Skills, and it's been a really good deal. And I get to spend 90% of my life at the rink, which people make jokes about all the time, but I think it's not a bad job.
Well, I mean, I quit my job.
Let's hear about you on that perspective.
I quit my job to follow in those footsteps. So obviously, I understand that piece of it. What's kind of like Individual Skills training style? Would you say of how we do things a little bit differently than other people?
Yeah, I mean, I think how it's always been since day one is being able to find things in kids' games that they, fail in, and there's a lot of them, as we all do. But how do you communicate to them on how to improve those things? Everyone loves to do certain things that they're good at. Everyone loves to, if they're fast, skate fast. If they have a good shot, shoot the puck all the time. So it's just, we've always been I think the biggest thing that we've done, and Rick has been the leader of that, is the communication that we have with kids at the end of practice, or staying up with them and talking to them, and kind of just taking year by year processes of that, and then being able to knowledgeably understand that there's there is hindrances in their game, and it's just the thing that prides me the most in it is seeing those kids succeed at those specific things, and the bulb comes on in their head, and their game completely elevates. Now, does it happen to everybody? Obviously not, but you get the masses and do that. But so, yeah, I mean, that's kind of how we operate, is just being able to pick out parts of people's games and communicate to them without being negative to them that, hey, you need to get better on this. 99% of the time they know that, but it's how do you do it, and it's okay to put yourself in positions to fail when you're doing training. It's just training. It's not a game, right? So, that's the part that we take a lot of pride in.
And I think the biggest way you guys are able to accomplish that is the fact that the program hasn't exceeded a size to where you couldn't stay up to date with every single athlete that you have.
Yeah, and I should have probably said that, but I think, and I listened to Rick's podcast, but there's one thing that we've always talked about, is that we've never, I think individual skills is known in the West Metro, but it's not like something you see at rinks all the time. We don't have flyers out, all those kind of things. And that's for a really very basic reason. It's because and throw a guarantee out there, but guarantees are guaranteed, but we take a lot of pride in our top guys being on the ice 90% of the time. We try to go 100%, but that's what it is. And so that's what you said, to piggyback on what you said, is like I could have expanded this business to make it really big and had 50 employees moving, all over the Twin Cities doing skill development. But I'm not out there. You're not out there. Rick's not out there. There's a number of other guys that we do, but they're not on the ice in the heart of our programs. And so we take a lot of pride in that, and that allows us to also be a part of a big mentorship program too. It's hard to keep track of 1,000 kids, but if you know kids personally and you can follow them through stuff, they have a lot more tendency to reach out to you if they're dealing with something, positively or negatively. And that's at the end of the day what it's all about, because that's what keeps you doing what you're doing.
Awesome. I'm going to wrap it up and actually do some fun lightning round questions. I just thought of that could be pretty fun. So you played for the University of Minnesota. What was your favorite away rink to play at in college?
The old Ingolstadt, no question.
The old Ingolstadt.
The old Ingolstadt. I mean, the new one was phenomenal. A fun fact for you on this quick one. We played in one of the last games at the old Ingolstadt, and I got to play in the first ever game at the new Ingolstadt. Nice. And so those two, the difference in the two, but the fan base and how it operated and the culture that they had up there at that time was second to none.
Most enjoyable teammate from your time at the U, or the one you had the most fun with?
Yeah, I mean, one of my best friends is Jordan Leopold, obviously, that I've grown up with. I happened to play with him growing up. And we went to the same high school together, played baseball together. So, I mean, we were close. We always lived together. So it was, he was my most, we went to every class together. So, out of necessity, maybe he was my favorite teammate.
All right. Taking high school playoffs out of it, because that's going to be obvious answers on state tournament games and stuff. Favorite game most memorable game you could think back to coaching high school?
Yikes. Well, a lot of them, my first few years were really fun just because of the nerves that came into it and doubting yourself. But I think if I think back of one game that was really, really fun, and I don't know the exact year, but I know what happened. We were at Cretin-Durham Hall, and they were in our section at that time. And it was a back and forth game the whole entire time. And we ended up in overtime. I think they scored late or something, but then in overtime, Colin Schmitz scored a one-timer in the high slot to win in 5-4 in overtime. And I don't want to say that was my first real big overtime experience being the high school coach, but it was one that was like there was nerves going both ways, and it was super fun. So that was a really fun game.
How about high school player that you're most proud of, like how far they've come throughout your time?
Wow. Hopefully they don't all listen to this, but let me think. There's a few. I mean, Mark Senin has been a guy that has been looked at Wayzata for a long time. Wasn't always the highest level kid, but just salt of the earth human. Was ended up being a captain in North Dakota. Still playing hockey. He's one of them. Man, I don't know. Like there was a kid named Joel Matthews that was super undersized, but just was the hardest working kid ever, and ended up having 54 points his senior year. Never played in the elite league, and just was just a great human too. And how he turned out as a human, and how much he battled through everything was one as well.
All right, last one. Favorite away rink to travel to in high school?
It's got to be Grand Rapids for me, I think.
Oh, wow.
I love Braemar, obviously, but we're playing Edina, so it's that. But Braymar's really cool. But if you haven't been to Grand Rapids when it's full and there's a city team up there, you should probably get that experience on your bucket list.
And there's a guy in the first row behind you. When you say that it's offsides, he says, "That's not offsides, coach."
Yeah. That's I've had some experiences with, and if you know me well enough, you know that I enjoy that part of the banter. But it's kind of funny that you still have some people that stand behind the coach and arguing with every single thing I said out loud. So it's pretty funny.
All right, we can wrap it up. This is another episode of Individual Skills Hockey Podcast, and we will see you next time.